The U.S. economy is in free fall. In just 24 hours, Nasdaq plunged 4.6%, and S&P 500 crashed to a dangerous level. This is not a coincidence. This is the direct result of Trump's failed economic policies. But, instead of taking responsibility, he blames Biden, China, and everyone but himself. So, what is really happening? During his presidency, Trump insisted that tariffs would make America rich. He confidently declared, "We will collect hundreds of billions from tariffs and become so rich, we won't even know what to do with the money." But that never happened. When Trump imposed high tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China, the consequences were immediate and devastating. American businesses lost $1.7 trillion in market value in just the first year, according to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Consumer prices surged, forcing American households to spend an extra $1,200 per year on everyday goods. The auto industry was crippled as Trump's tariffs on car parts raised production costs by 20%, making U.S. vehicles more expensive and less competitive. U.S. farmers suffered enormous losses. U.S. agricultural exports plummeted by 40%, according to the Department of Agriculture. China shifted to buying from Brazil and Argentina, cutting off American farmers from a major market. The GDP crashed, a warning sign of recession. With trade partners turning away from the U.S., economic growth turned negative, a 2.3% drop in GDP in the first quarter. Experts warn that this is a clear sign of an incoming recession. Trump has always called himself a business genius, but his real track record tells a different story, a history of bankruptcy and failure. Trump bankrupted 6 casinos in Atlantic City, including Trump Plaza and Trump Taj Mahal. Forbes estimated that if Trump had invested his inheritance into the S&P 500, his net worth would be multiples higher than it is today. Trump promised a prestigious business school. Instead, Trump University was a fraudulent scheme, leading to $25 million in lawsuit settlements after deceiving thousands of students. In 2017, Trump signed one of the biggest tax cuts in history, claiming it would create jobs and boost wages. Instead, what really happened? Corporations spent $1.1 trillion on stock buybacks, increasing CEO salaries, but doing little for workers. The national deficit exploded to $3.1 trillion, the largest in U.S. history at the time. As soon as Trump left office, the market began to crash because the so-called economic growth was built on artificial inflation. Before the election, Trump made bold claims about how he would revive the American economy, but when asked recently whether a recession was coming, he simply said, "I can't guarantee anything." The reality of Trump's economic record: manufacturing jobs declined by 240,000, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. His trade war caused massive layoffs as businesses struggled with higher costs. Middle-class Americans paid the price while corporate executives got richer. The economic damage from Trump's presidency is not easily reversed. The U.S. is now struggling with a record-high national deficit and unstable stock market. Businesses struggling to recover, weakened trade relationships with global partners. Experts warned that it could take years to recover from Trump's economic disaster. The stock market is in chaos, prices are still rising, businesses are barely surviving, and Trump, he's still lying. So, the real question is, will Americans finally wake up? As economic instability continues, the truth is clear. The only question that remains is whether Americans will finally see through Trump's lies or repeat history. Stay tuned, the next revelations will change everything. The U.S. imposes a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports. France retaliates immediately. Trade tensions escalate, threatening to disrupt global supply chains. Not just France, but the entire European Union, EU, steps in, preparing countermeasures. Could this be the beginning of a full-scale trade war between the U.S. and Europe? On February 10, 2025, President Donald Trump imposed a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports, aiming to protect U.S. domestic industries from foreign competition. However, this policy shocked America's trade partners, especially Europe. Within 1 month, France struck back, enacting severe trade restrictions against the U.S. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot made it clear, "We will not allow Washington to impose trade policies on the European economy." US-France trade relations reach an all-time low. Both European and American automakers suffer due to supply chain disruptions. The EU intervenes, considering retaliatory tariffs on US products, further escalating the conflict. Steel and aluminium are crucial for car manufacturing, accounting for over 70% of a vehicle's weight. With tariffs in place, European production costs surged by 15 to 20%. Major European automakers affected: Renault and Peugeot, Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz, Germany. Car prices in the EU are expected to rise by $3,000 to $5,000 per vehicle. European car sales could decline by 8% in 2025. Over 50,000 jobs in France and Germany are at risk. The ripple effect on US car makers. Surprisingly, American automakers are not spared. Ford and General Motors, which import parts from Europe, face increased production costs, reducing profitability. Supply chain slowdowns affecting manufacturing output. Industry calls for a resolution. As both American and European automakers feel the pressure, industry leaders urge Washington and Brussels to negotiate a solution. But neither side is willing to back down. Amid rising tensions with the US, France actively seeks new trade partnerships, and China becomes the preferred ally. By 2023, trade between France and China reached nearly $79 billion, marking a 25% increase from the previous year. By 2025, French companies strengthened ties with China, focusing on electric vehicle, EV, technology, aerospace and aviation, agriculture, and food exports, strategic agreements. Renault and Peugeot secured partnerships with Chinese giants BYD and CATL, gaining access to advanced battery technology, reducing reliance on US suppliers, joint EV manufacturing deals expanding their presence in the Asian market. French President Emmanuel Macron emphasizes the need for trade diversification. France's economic future cannot depend solely on the United States. Strengthening our ties with China opens new doors for innovation and sustainable growth. This move signals a major shift in global economic alliances, challenging US trade dominance. Not just France, the entire European Union is preparing to retaliate. The EU's response to US tariffs. The European Commission is reviewing countermeasures against US imports, including increasing tariffs on American car imports potentially up to 20 to 30%, taxing US coal and liquefied natural gas, LNG, restricting access to EU aviation and tech markets for US companies. President Emmanuel Macron issues a strong statement: Europe cannot allow its economy to be dictated by unilateral decisions from Washington. If these countermeasures are implemented, a full-scale trade war could erupt, affecting industries worldwide. Now, China has just responded strongly to Trump's new tariffs, not only targeting American agricultural products, but also threatening critical high-tech industries and vital minerals. How will these strikes affect the US economy and the global market under Trump's leadership? Let's break it down. China has chosen US agricultural products as the first target in this new trade war. Items like soybeans, corn, chicken, and other agricultural products are now facing heavy tariffs. Agriculture is a strategic sector in the US economy, particularly for the Midwestern states that heavily supported President Trump. The US exported nearly $22 billion worth of soybeans to China in 2024, and these new tariffs could push American farmers into financial crisis, even leading to bankruptcies. If China continues imposing tariffs, the impact won't be limited to farmers, it will ripple through the US economy, affecting everything from goods prices to export values. The markets will be disrupted, businesses will struggle to maintain supply chains, and consumers will face higher prices. This could lead to a negative spiral, reducing the competitiveness of American industries on the global market. However, agriculture is just the beginning of China's retaliation strategy. They are also targeting high-tech industries and crucial minerals like rare earth elements, which are essential for manufacturing semiconductors and military equipment. If China tightens its control over these exports, the U.S. will face major challenges in maintaining production of advanced technologies, especially in the defense sector. American tech companies will be forced to contend with higher costs and serious disruptions in supply chains. China could disrupt products like smartphones, computers, and even military gear, slowing production and causing widespread damage to the U.S. economy. If the U.S. cannot find alternative sources, these industries will pay a heavy price. These effects could weaken America's competitiveness in the global tech race, leaving it behind other global powers. Trump has made it clear that he will not back down. The U.S. administration believes these tariffs are necessary to address the trade imbalance and unfair practices from China. However, this also brings significant consequences for the U.S. economy. U.S. markets may face sudden price increases on consumer goods, from smartphones to cars. Companies will struggle to maintain supply chains and lower product prices. High-tech products may become more expensive, directly impacting consumers and potentially pushing the economy into inflation. This could reduce purchasing power, increase pressure on small businesses, and create a cycle of rising prices. Moreover, if this situation continues, the instability in the economy could lead to increased unemployment, affecting consumer spending and slowing the recovery of the U.S. economy. These tariff policies will have a widespread impact on all levels of American society, from consumers to investors. And China can still deliver major blows to the U.S., especially by controlling rare earth minerals. These minerals are crucial for producing semiconductors and military equipment. If China continues to restrict these exports, the U.S. will struggle to maintain the production of cutting-edge technologies, which will hurt both the tech and defense industries. Specifically, American tech companies will have to seek alternative sources, which will be costly and cause major production delays. Canada strikes back at U.S. tariffs, a heavy blow to the U.S. economy. U.S.-Canada trade tensions are at an all-time high. The U.S. imposed record-high tariffs, and Canada struck back with force. But what's more concerning is that Canada holds a strategic card that could severely impact the U.S. economy. What is it? The importance of Canada's energy supply. If there's one sector where the U.S. heavily relies on Canada, it's energy. Few people realize that Canada is the largest supplier of crude oil to the U.S., with most of it coming from Alberta's oil sands. Refineries in the Midwest are specifically designed to process Canadian crude, not oil from Russia or the Middle East. Beyond oil, Canada is the second largest supplier of natural gas to the U.S., with an extensive pipeline network. Canada's energy exports have been the lifeline of American industries for decades. But what if Canada tightens its supply in response to U.S. tariffs? The economic consequences could be severe. Canada's two-phase retaliatory tariffs. Canada isn't just leveraging energy. It has a calculated tariff retaliation strategy. A 25% tariff on $30 billion worth of U.S. goods, mainly targeting essential consumer products like food, clothing, and household items. This directly affects everyday American life, increasing pressure on businesses and policymakers. An even harsher blow, with $125 billion in U.S. goods facing tariffs. This time, Canada is striking core American industries, including automobiles, higher tariffs on cars, parts, and electric vehicles, steel and aluminum, disrupting industrial supply chains, and agriculture, causing major losses in key U.S. farming states. These measures could destabilize entire sectors while U.S. consumers brace for rising prices. Impact on the auto industry, one of the hardest-hit sectors. The automotive industry. For decades, the U.S. and Canada have operated an integrated supply chain where key auto components, EV batteries, sensors, frames, and engines, are produced across both countries. Disrupting this flow means skyrocketing production costs for American automakers. Experts predict vehicle prices could rise by thousands of dollars, directly impacting U.S. consumers. EVs are particularly vulnerable as essential materials like nickel, lithium, and cobalt, crucial for batteries, are sourced from Canada. Even more concerning, Canada has hinted at turning to new partners such as Europe, China, or South Korea for auto and EV trade. If this happens, the US risks losing its position as a global leader in the EV industry. Will the US accept these economic losses just to maintain its tariffs? Public and political reactions in Canada. Surprisingly, the Canadian public is not backing down from this trade tension. Unlike before, this time Canadians overwhelmingly support the government's tough response. Recent surveys show that over 70% of Canadians approve of the retaliatory measures, reflecting a strong sentiment: if we are attacked, we will fight back. The Canadian government is not alone in this battle. Canadian industries are actively seeking new markets in Europe and Asia to reduce dependence on the US. Some Canadian politicians have even called for stronger cooperation with the European Union, EU, and Asia-Pacific nations to counterbalance US pressure. This raises a concerning scenario. If Canada shifts its economic partnerships, the US could lose one of its most crucial trade allies. Politically, this marks a turning point. Canadian leaders are no longer positioning themselves as passive trade partners. Instead, they are openly discussing closer ties with Europe, Asia, and other economic blocs to counterbalance US influence. This could redefine North America's economic landscape, potentially reducing the US's dominance in regional trade. Japan, the UK, Saudi Arabia, even India are dumping US dollars fast, gold reserves surging, trade deals happening without the dollar. What's going on? Since late 2024, the global financial system has seen a major shift. Multiple economies are pulling back from US Treasury bonds. Japan, the UK, Saudi Arabia, and India have cut back drastically on US government debt. Instead, they're piling into gold and trading in local currencies. This isn't just a temporary adjustment, it's a strategic move, a push to diversify reserves and lessen reliance on the US financial system. According to the US Treasury Department, 16 of the world's 20 largest economies have reduced their US dollar holdings. This is not random, it's a deliberate economic strategy. Japan, the largest foreign holder of U.S. Treasuries, slashed $27.3 billion in December 2024, its lowest level in 5 years. The UK, one of America's closest allies, offloaded a record $44.1 billion, the biggest drop in over a decade. Saudi Arabia not only dumped $15.1 billion in U.S. bonds but also increased its gold reserves. India, China, Switzerland, Germany, all moving in the same direction. These massive sell-offs point to a deeper problem. Countries are losing confidence in the long-term stability of the US dollar. For decades, the US dollar has been the dominant force in global finance, but now many nations are rethinking their dependence on it. The biggest concern for foreign governments, the dollar is losing its purchasing power. Despite Federal Reserve policies, inflation in the United States remained high throughout 2024. Nations fear that the dollar will continue to weaken, and when a currency loses value, so do the assets tied to it. This is why gold is becoming the preferred store of value. Unlike the dollar, gold doesn't lose value due to inflation. The biggest concern for foreign governments, the dollar is losing its purchasing power. Despite Federal Reserve policies, inflation in the United States remained high throughout 2024. Nations fear that the dollar will continue to weaken, and when a currency loses value, so do the assets tied to it. This is why gold is becoming the preferred store of value. Unlike the dollar, gold doesn't lose value due to inflation. For decades, the U.S. has used its financial dominance to impose sanctions on nations that challenge its policies. Russia, Iran, Venezuela all faced economic pressure due to their dependence on the U.S. financial system. Countries don't want to be vulnerable to U.S. policies anymore. By reducing their reliance on the dollar, nations gain control over their own economies. This is why the world is moving toward alternative financial systems. Nations are not just dumping the dollar, they are actively building a new financial system. Instead of using the US dollar, many nations are settling trade in their own currencies. China and Russia, they've cut dollar transactions by 40% in just 2 years. India and Iran are now settling energy trade in Indian rupees instead of dollars. Japan is encouraging businesses to trade in yen instead of US dollars. The more countries trade in their own currencies, the less they depend on the dollar. Nations are buying gold at an unprecedented rate. China added 150+ tons of gold in 2024, setting a new record. Poland, Turkey, India, all boosting gold reserves to protect their economies. Gold is a safe haven, unlike the dollar. It doesn't lose value due to inflation or economic instability. To escape U.S. control, countries are creating their own financial networks. Russia launched SPFS, a SWIFT alternative that allows banks to process transactions without U.S. interference. China developed CIPS, a cross-border payment system that uses yuan instead of dollars. BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, are discussing a new reserve currency to compete with the U.S. dollar. These systems make it easier for countries to trade without using the U.S. financial system.